6 years. That's how long I dedicated my life to Mason Technology Solutions. 6 years of canceled weekend plans, late nights, and holiday shifts. When I finally requested my first real vacation in 3 years, our new manager, Sarah, denied it without even looking at my record. She didn't realize that the very system she was using to track employee performance was one I had built from scratch. The irony of what happened next still makes me laugh to this day. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. When I first joined Mason Technology Solutions as a junior software developer, I was beyond excited. Fresh out of college with my computer science degree, landing a position at one of the fastest-growing tech firms in Boston felt like hitting the jackpot. The company had just secured a massive contract with several Fortune 500 clients and needed all hands on deck to deliver on their promises. My name is Marcus Walsh, and like most newcomers, I was eager to prove myself. The interview process had been grueling, 4 rounds with increasingly difficult technical questions and personality assessments. When Ryan Miller, the development team leader at the time, called to offer me the position, I accepted on the spot without even negotiating. The salary? "We work hard here at Mason, but we play hard too," Ryan had said during my orientation. "We value work-life balance." Those words would turn out to be the first broken promise of many. The initial months were challenging, but exciting. I was assigned to a team working on an internal project, an employee management system that would track performance metrics, project assignments, and time off. The company had been using outdated software that frequently crashed, causing headaches for HR and management alike. Our task was to build something robust from the ground up. My teammates, Jessica Ramirez, Derek Washington, and Tyler Chen, were talented developers with years of experience. I was definitely a rookie, but they welcomed me and shared their knowledge generously. We worked well together, each bringing different strengths to the table. Jessica was brilliant with database architecture, Derek could solve any front-end problem, Tyler was our security expert, and I quickly found my niche in system integration. 3 months into the project, Ryan called me into his office. "Marcus, I've been watching your work. You've got serious potential, kid." I smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "The team is behind schedule, and we need someone to take lead on the time-off management module. I think you're ready for more responsibility." "Really? I've only been here 3 months." Ryan leaned forward. "Sometimes 3 months of exceptional work is worth more than years of mediocrity. Are you up for it?" Of course I said yes. It was my first chance to shine, to have ownership over something important. What I didn't realize was that this opportunity was the beginning of a pattern that would define my next 6 years. The deadline for the first version of the system was tight, just 8 weeks away. I started putting in extra hours, coming in early and staying late. My apartment became a place I merely slept in. The module I was responsible for was complex, connecting to payroll, HR approvals, and project management to ensure adequate coverage during employee absences. When difficulties arose with some API integrations, I spent an entire weekend at the Keen office, subsisting on delivery pizza and energy drinks. By Monday morning, bleary-eyed but triumphant, I had solved the problem. Ryan was impressed. "This is exactly the kind of dedication we need at Mason." The praise felt good. The team delivered the first version on time, and our system, which we named Mason Metrics, was implemented company-wide. There were bugs, of course, but far fewer than expected for a V1 release. The executives were pleased, and Ryan made sure they knew who had gone above and beyond. My first performance review came with a substantial raise and new responsibilities. I was now the lead developer for Mason Metrics, responsible for maintenance and future enhancements. The original team dispersed to other projects, while I remained the keeper of the system I had helped build. Year 2 at Mason blurred into Year 3. The company continued its explosive growth, expanding from 200 employees to over 500. Mason metrics needed constant updates to keep pace. New features, increased capacity, improved security. The requests never stopped coming. I didn't mind at first. Each challenge was an opportunity to learn, to improve my skills. I became the expert, the go-to person when something went wrong. It felt good to be needed, to be the one who could swoop in and save the day. But the cost was mounting. Friends stopped inviting me to events because I always canceled. My parents complained that they only heard from me on major holidays. If then, during my 3rd year, Jessica left the company, we had lunch before her departure. "You know this isn't normal, right?" she said as she picked at her salad. "What do you mean?" "The hours you work, the expectations they put on you. I've been watching you burn yourself out for 2 years now." I shrugged. "It's a growing company. Everyone puts in extra time." Jessica shook her head. "Not like you, Marcus. I track my hours. I averaged 45 hours a week during my time here. Derek says you're often still working when he logs in from home at 10 p.m. "Mason Metrics is my baby," I said defensively. "No one knows it like I do." "That's exactly the problem." Jessica put down her fork. "They've made you indispensable and you've let them. There's a difference between occasionally going above and beyond and making overtime your baseline." Her words bothered me, but I brushed them aside. Jessica just didn't understand my commitment to excellence. Besides, Ryan had hinted at a potential management role opening up. Just a little longer, I told myself. Year 4 brought significant changes. Ryan left for a startup, and his replacement, Michael Thompson, was a numbers guy with little understanding of the technical challenges we faced. The promised management position never materialized. "We need you right where you are," Michael explained when I broached the subject. "No one else can maintain Mason metrics like you do. You're too valuable in your current role." It was a backhanded compliment that effectively trapped me. I had become so specialized and so essential to one system that I couldn't move up or move on. My market value outside the company was diminishing as my skills in other areas grew stagnant. Still, I persisted. I added new modules to Mason Metrics, including a sophisticated analytics dashboard that executives loved. I automated processes that saved thousands of man-hours annually. The system became the backbone of the company's operations. During year 5, my father had a minor heart attack. It was a wake-up call. He was getting older, and I had barely seen my parents in years. I decided to take 2 weeks off to visit them in Michigan. It would be my first vacation since a 3-day weekend 2 years prior. I submitted the request through Mason Metrics, ironically using the very module I had designed, and received approval from Michael. I bought plane tickets, arranged for a rental car, and even scheduled some day trips with my parents. 3 days before my departure, Michael called me into his office. "Marcus, about your vacation request." My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. "A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. We've just landed the Westfield account. It's a huge potential 8-figure revenue. They want customizations to their instance of Mason Metrics, and they need it in 4 weeks. But my vacation, I know, and I'm sorry. But this is all hands on deck. Maybe you can reschedule for next quarter?" I wanted to argue, to stand my ground. But years of conditioning made me acquiesce. I canceled my tickets, lost the deposit, and called my parents with the bad news. Their disappointment was palpable, though they tried to hide it. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the wall, Jessica's words echoing in my mind. Was this really what I wanted? Was this who I wanted to be? The Westfield project was as demanding as expected. I worked 80-hour weeks, bringing the customizations in on time and under budget. Michael was ecstatic. The executives were pleased. I received another raise and a substantial bonus. But the victory felt hollow. As year 6 began, Michael announced he was moving to another division. His replacement would be Sarah Mitchell, coming from a competitor with a reputation for efficiency and high standards. The transition was scheduled for March. In January, my mother called. She and my father were planning their 40th anniversary in June and wanted me to be part of the celebration. They'd rented a cabin on Lake Michigan for a week. My sister and her family would be there, relatives I hadn't seen in years. "We understand if you can't make it," my mother said, the resignation in her voice breaking my heart. "We know how important your work is." That night, I made a decision. This time would be different. I would take that vacation, no matter what. I had given Mason Technology Solutions 6 years of my life, often at the expense of everything else. They could survive without me for 1 week. I submitted the request early, 5 months in advance, through Mason Metrics. The system showed adequate coverage for my absence. No major projects were scheduled for that week. Everything aligned perfectly. Sarah Mitchell took over in March as planned. She was in her mid-40s, sharply dressed, with a brisk manner that immediately set the tone for her leadership style. In her first team meeting, she outlined her expectations. "I believe in efficiency and accountability," she stated, scanning the room with piercing eyes. "Every hour must be productive, every resource justified. I'll be reviewing all processes and personnel to ensure we're operating at peak performance." Over the next few weeks, Sarah conducted one-on-one meetings with each team member. When my turn came, she had Mason Metrics open on her screen. "Marcus Walsh," she said, not looking up from her monitor. 6 years with the company. Primary responsibility: development and maintenance of Mason Metrics. "That's right," I confirmed. "I've been with the system since its inception." Sarah scrolled through my file. "Your performance metrics are strong, but I see a concerning pattern of resource allocation. You spend 95% of your time on a single system. Because I'm the primary, that creates a dangerous single point of failure," she interrupted. "No individual should be indispensable. It's inefficient." Her criticism stung, especially since it echoed my own recent doubts. But what came next caught me completely off guard. "I also notice you have a vacation request pending for June." "Yes, for my parents' 40th anniversary. It's been planned for months," Sarah frowned. "June is the end of Q2. We'll be preparing for the board meeting and fiscal year planning. Your absence would be disruptive." My heart sank. The request was approved by the system. There's adequate coverage, and no major projects are scheduled. "The system doesn't make decisions, Ms. Walsh. I do, and I'm denying this request." "It's Mr. Walsh," I corrected, trying to keep my composure. "And this vacation is extremely important to me and my family." Sarah finally looked up from her screen. "If everyone prioritized personal matters over company needs, where would we be? I need reliable team members who understand sacrifice." Years of frustration bubbled to the surface. "With all due respect, Ms. Mitchell, I've sacrificed plenty for this company. I've worked countless nights and weekends. I've canceled plans, missed important events. I built Mason Metrics from the ground up, including the very system you're using to track employee performance and time off." Sarah's expression hardened. "Emotional appeals don't move me, Mr. Walsh. My decision stands. Your request is denied." I left her office in a daze, anger and disbelief warring within me. For the first time in 6 years, I left work at exactly 5 p.m. I needed to think. That evening, nursing a beer in my apartment, I made the second important decision of the year. I opened my laptop and began drafting my resignation letter. 2 weeks. Notice, professional and courteous despite everything. I would find another job, one that respected boundaries and valued work-life balance. I had savings. I could afford a brief gap in employment if necessary. But before I sent the resignation, a thought occurred to me. Mason Metrics was my creation. I knew every line of code, every database field, every API connection. And in that moment of clarity, I realized there was a third option, one that would allow me to attend my parents' anniversary and potentially open Sarah's eyes to the value of the human beings behind the metrics. The next day, I arrived at work early and got to work on a special update to Mason Metrics. The morning after my confrontation with Sarah, I arrived at the office with a renewed sense of purpose. For years, I had poured my heart and soul into Mason Metrics, creating fail-safes and redundancies to ensure the system would never let the company down. What I hadn't considered was building in protections for the people who actually made the system work, people like me. As I sipped my coffee and reviewed the Mason Metrics codebase, I identified the perfect opportunity. The system used an advanced algorithm to determine appropriate staffing levels, project timelines, and resource allocation. It took into account historical data, seasonal fluctuations, and even predicted future needs based on growth projections. Sarah was relying on this algorithm to make her decisions, including the denial of my vacation request. What she didn't know was that the algorithm had one critical flaw. It wasn't accounting for specialized knowledge. It calculated staffing, needs based on job titles and general skill sets, not the institutional knowledge certain employees possessed. In my case, I was classified as a senior developer, a category with plenty of other team members. But none of those other developers knew Mason Metrics like I did. I decided to add a new variable to the algorithm, a knowledge dependency score, that would quantify how reliant certain systems were on specific individuals. The higher the score, the more risky it would be to have that person unavailable. It wasn't a malicious change. In fact, it was a legitimate improvement that would give management a more accurate picture of potential vulnerabilities. I spent the next week carefully crafting this update, documenting every change meticulously. The beauty of it was its subtlety. It wouldn't trigger any alarms or sudden shifts. It would simply provide additional data points that painted a more complete picture. When the update was ready, I submitted it through the proper channels, describing it as a risk assessment enhancement that would help identify knowledge silos and improve long-term stability. I even added examples of how this could prevent problems during employee transitions or unexpected absences. The update sailed through the approval process. Sarah, focused on broader organizational changes, barely glanced at the technical details. She saw the words risk assessment and improved stability and gave her stamp of approval. The update went live the following Monday. For the next few weeks, I continued my work as usual, fixing bugs, handling support tickets, and attending meetings. On the surface, nothing had changed. But behind the scenes, Mason Metrics was now diligently calculating knowledge dependency scores for every system and employee. As expected, my score for Mason Metrics was off the charts. The true test came in late April when Sarah began planning for the Q2 wrap-up. She called a department meeting to assign responsibilities. Based on our resource allocation model, we'll need everyone fully engaged in the office during the last 2 weeks of June, she announced, bringing up a Mason Metrics dashboard on the conference room screen. No exceptions. I waited for her to single me out, to reference my vacation request again. But something unexpected happened. As she scrolled through the system recommendations, a red flag appeared next to my name. Sarah frowned, clicking on it. "What's this?" she muttered, reading the pop-up message. I knew exactly what it said. Warning: critical knowledge dependency detected. Absence of this resource creates significant operational risk. Sarah clicked through to the detailed analysis, where Mason Metrics had helpfully calculated that my absence during the specific week I had requested vacation would create a 78% chance of critical system issues if any unexpected problems arose. With Mason Metrics itself. "Marcus," Sarah said, turning to me with a puzzled expression. The system is flagging a serious dependency issue with you and Mason Metrics. I feigned surprise. Oh? What kind of issue? It says you're the only one with sufficient knowledge to handle any major problems with the system. Is that accurate? Well, I said carefully, I've been the primary developer since its creation. No one else has worked with it as extensively as I have. Sarah frowned. This contradicts our staffing model for June. According to this, if you're unavailable and there's an issue with Mason Metrics during the Q2 wrap-up, we could face significant delays or even data loss. Several of my colleagues nodded in agreement. They knew all too well how often they came to me with Mason Metrics questions. We need to address this immediately, Sarah declared. Marcus, I want comprehensive documentation on all Mason Metrics functions by the end of next week. We need to reduce this dependency. I'd be happy to start that process, I replied calmly. But completely documenting 6 years of development, including all the custom modules and integrations, would take months, not weeks. I've been asking for resources to train backup personnel for over 2 years now. Sarah stared at me, clearly caught in a dilemma of her own making. She had denied my vacation based on company needs, but now the system was telling her that my absence could pose an even greater risk than she'd realized. After the meeting, Sarah called me into her office. Her demeanor had shifted subtly, less commanding, more calculating. Marcus, about your vacation request. Yes? I kept my expression neutral. The knowledge dependency score is concerning. Have you made any progress on documentation or training others? I've created basic documentation over the years, but without dedicated time allocated for comprehensive knowledge transfer, it's been impossible to bring anyone else up to speed. As I mentioned in the meeting, I've requested resources for this repeatedly. Sarah tapped her pen against her desk, thinking, what would happen if there was an issue with Mason Metrics while you were away? I shrugged. Best case scenario? Hours of downtime while someone else tries to figure out what's wrong. Worst case? Data corruption that could take weeks to fix. This wasn't an exaggeration. Mason Metrics had become incredibly complex over the years, with customizations for various departments and integrations with nearly every other system in the company. I see, Sarah said finally. I need to reconsider our approach here. 3 days later, I received a notification from Mason Metrics. My vacation request had been approved. No explanation, no message from Sarah, just a system approval. I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. May passed in a flurry of activity. Sarah implemented a new initiative to identify and address knowledge dependencies throughout the department. Suddenly, the problem I had faced for years was being treated as a priority. Junior developers were assigned to shadow me, asking questions and taking notes on Mason Metrics operations. I was given time to create proper documentation and conduct training sessions. It was everything I had been asking for, and it came with an unexpected benefit. My workload actually decreased as others began taking on tasks I had previously handled alone. For the first time in years, I left the office at a reasonable hour most days. As June approached, I confirmed my travel plans with my parents, who were overjoyed that I would definitely be joining them for their anniversary. I even had time to find them a special gift, a custom photo album chronicling their 4 decades together, including pictures from my childhood that I had digitized and restored. The week before my vacation, Sarah stopped by my desk. Everything's set for your absence. Next week? She asked, her tone professional but not unfriendly. Yes, Kevin and Alicia are fully briefed on routine maintenance, and they have escalation procedures if anything major comes up. Sarah nodded. Good. The knowledge transfer sessions have been helpful. The dependency scores are already showing improvement. I'm glad to hear that, I said sincerely. It's better for everyone when knowledge is shared. Indeed. She hesitated, then added, Enjoy your family celebration, Marcus. I understand now why it was so important to you. It seemed the system had taught Sarah a valuable lesson about the human element of management, something no algorithm could fully capture. I left for Michigan the following Saturday, feeling lighter than I had in years. The cabin my parents had rented was beautiful, perched on a bluff overlooking Lake Michigan, with stunning sunset views and a private path down to the beach. My sister Andrea arrived with her husband Tom and their twins, Emma and Jacob, now 10 years old and barely recognizing their uncle who they hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. "Uncle Marcus, Mom says you make computers do magic tricks," Jacob announced upon seeing me. I laughed, scooping him up for a hug. Not exactly magic, but sometimes it feels that way. Those first few days were perfect. Family meals on the deck, walks along the shoreline collecting beach glass, board games in the evening that inevitably devolved into competitive chaos. I taught the twins how to skip stones across the water and helped my father grill the perfect steaks. For the first time in years, I felt fully present, not constantly checking my phone or thinking about work problems. On Wednesday, the actual anniversary day, we decorated the cabin with streamers and balloons. Andrea and I prepared our parents' favorite meal, my father's cherished pot roast recipe and my mother's adored lemon meringue pie. We shared stories and toasted their 4 decades together. 40 more years, I said, raising my glass. My father, never one for public displays of emotion, had tears in his eyes. "Having all of you here is the best gift we could ask for." My mother squeezed my hand. "Especially you, Marcus. We've missed you so much." Their words hit me hard. I had missed so much family time, countless moments like this, all for a job that had consumed me. Yes, I'd built something impressive at Mason, but at what cost? The next morning, I woke early and took my coffee down to the beach. The sun was just rising over the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. I sat on a driftwood log, contemplating the choices that had led me here and the changes I needed to make going forward. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it. I was on vacation after all. But curiosity got the better of me. It was an email from Kevin, one of the developers I'd trained on Mason metrics. "Sorry to bother you on vacation, but thought you'd want to know. Mason metrics crashed during the Q2 data compilation. Sarah tried to make some last-minute customizations to the executive dashboard without going through proper testing. Systems been down for 6 hours. She's freaking out. Don't worry, Alicia and I are handling it per your documentation. Enjoy your vacation." I stared at the message, a mix of emotions washing over me. Part of me felt vindicated. This was exactly the scenario I had warned about. Another part felt concerned for my colleagues dealing with the crisis. But mostly, I felt a profound sense of release. For the first time in 6 years, a Mason metrics emergency wasn't my emergency. I tucked the phone back in my pocket without replying. Kevin and Alicia had this handled. They had the documentation, the training, and my confidence. This was exactly why I had pushed for knowledge sharing in the first place. Later that day, as we were preparing for a family barbecue, I received another email, this time from Sarah herself. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. Today has been a harsh lesson in the value of institutional knowledge and proper procedure. The system issues we're facing have made it abundantly clear how right you were about the knowledge dependency concerns. I made a rookie mistake bypassing the testing protocols you established, and we're paying the price. Kevin and Alicia are doing their best, but recovery is taking longer than anticipated. I wanted you to know that I understand now what you've been contributing all these years, often without recognition. Enjoy the remainder of your vacation. You've more than earned it. We'll talk when you return." I showed the email to my father, who chuckled after reading it. "So your plan worked, eh?" he said with a knowing glance. "What plan?" I asked innocently. "Son, I've known you your entire life. You don't just accept defeat. You found a way to make your point while still getting what you wanted." I smiled. Let's just say I helped the system more accurately reflect reality and taught your new boss a valuable lesson in the process. That was a bonus, I admitted. My father slapped me on the shoulder. I'm proud of you, not for outsmarting your boss, but for finally standing up for yourself and what matters. Your mother and I have worried about you, working all those hours, never taking time for yourself. I know. I'm sorry I've been absent so much. Don't be sorry. Just do better going forward. He looked out at the lake, where the twins were attempting to build an elaborate sand castle. Life moves quickly, Marcus. Don't miss it while staring at a computer screen. The remainder of the vacation was unmarred by work interruptions. I deliberately checked email only once a day, and even then, just to confirm that things were under control. By the time we packed up to leave on Saturday, Kevin had reported that Mason Metrics was back online and functioning normally. The crisis had passed. As I hugged my parents goodbye, I made a promise, to them and to myself, that I wouldn't let another 3 years pass before our next visit. Life was too short, and family too precious. The flight back to Boston gave me time to think about what awaited me at Mason Technology Solutions. I had proven my point to Sarah, but that was just the beginning. The company culture that had allowed, even encouraged, my unhealthy work habits remained unchanged. Sarah was just one manager in a system that valued productivity over people. I had options now. My skills were valuable. My resume impressive. I could find a position at a company with a healthier culture, one that truly valued work-life balance rather than just paying lip service to the concept, or I could stay and try to change Mason from within. The Knowledge Dependency Initiative was a start, but there was much more to be done. Could I be the catalyst for broader cultural change? As the plane began its descent into Boston, I made my decision. Monday morning would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one way or another. When I walked into the office on Monday, there was a noticeable shift in atmosphere. Colleagues who had barely acknowledged me in the past now greeted me warmly, some even stopping to chat about my vacation. Word had spread about the Mason Metrics meltdown and how the documentation and training I'd initiated had saved the day. I made my way to my desk, finding a handwritten note propped against my monitor. Marcus, please see me in my office when you arrive. Sarah. The moment of truth had arrived. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and headed toward the executive wing, ready to face whatever came next. I knocked on Sarah's office door, steeling myself for whatever confrontation. Might await. Come in, she called. I entered to find Sarah standing by her window, gazing out at the Boston skyline. She turned as the door closed behind me, her expression unreadable. Welcome back, Marcus. How was the anniversary celebration? Not what I expected as an opening question. It was wonderful, thank you. My parents were thrilled to have the whole family together. Sarah nodded, gesturing for me to take a seat as she returned to her desk chair. I imagine they were. An awkward silence stretched between us. I waited, letting her take the lead. Finally, she sighed. I owe you a proper apology. My email didn't adequately express how wrong I was, both in denying your vacation and in circumventing the protocols you established for Mason Metrics. I appreciate that, I said carefully. The system crash was... She paused, searching for the right word. Illuminating. 6 hours of downtime during Q2 closing. The executives were not pleased. I could only imagine the chaos that had ensued. Quarter end was always high pressure, with departments scrambling to finalize numbers and generate reports. Kevin and Alicia performed admirably, she continued, but it was clear that they were operating from your playbook, not their own expertise. The documentation you provided was their lifeline. I nodded. They're quick learners, but Mason Metrics is complex. It takes time to develop true proficiency. Yes, I understand that now. Sarah opened a folder on her desk. Which brings me to the purpose of this meeting. The dependency issue you identified, or rather that the system identified, is real and requires addressing. My heart sank. Slightly. Was this where she asked me to spend the next several months creating exhaustive documentation? To train my own replacements? I've spoken with the executive team, and we've decided to create a new position. She slid a document across the desk toward me. Director of Systems Architecture, reporting directly to the CTO. The role would oversee all internal systems, with a focus on knowledge distribution, redundancy planning, and sustainable development practices. I stared at the job description, momentarily speechless. This was no token promotion. It was a significant step up in both responsibility and authority. We'd like to offer the position to you, Sarah said, her tone now entirely professional. Your experience with Mason Metrics has highlighted the need for someone who understands not just the technical aspects of our systems, but the human components as well. Someone who can ensure we don't create these dangerous dependencies in the future. I don't know what to say, I admitted, scanning the details of the offer. The salary was nearly double my current compensation, with additional benefits and equity options. You don't need to decide immediately. Take some time to... Why? I interrupted, looking up from the papers. Why this sudden change? A week ago, you were denying my vacation request and questioning my value to the company. Sarah's expression tightened briefly, then relaxed into something akin to respect. Fair question. The answer has several parts. She leaned back in her chair. First, the system crash demonstrated the vulnerability we've created by allowing a single person to become indispensable to critical infrastructure. That's a failure of management, not your failure. I couldn't argue with that assessment. Second, your solution, the Knowledge Dependency Score and subsequent training initiative, showed me you're thinking about systemic solutions, not just technical ones. That's the kind of thinking we need at the director level. Again, reasonable. And third, she continued with a hint of a smile, I received some rather pointed feedback from the executive team about my handling of your vacation request. Apparently, several of them have worked with you over the years and were not pleased to learn I'd denied time off to, as CFO Peterson put it, the guy who keeps the lights on around here. That made me chuckle. Peterson had always been direct. So to be completely transparent, Sarah concluded, this offer comes from a recognition of your value, a need to address a significant vulnerability, and yes, some pressure from above to not lose you over my mismanagement. Does that answer your question? Her honesty was refreshing. It does. Thank you. Take the day to review the offer. We can discuss any questions tomorrow. I nodded, gathering the papers. As I stood to leave, Sarah added, One more thing, Marcus. Whatever you decide, there will be changes to how we operate. No more solo heroes working nights and weekends. No more single points of failure. That era ends now, regardless of who takes this position. I couldn't agree more, I replied sincerely. I spent that evening in my apartment reviewing the offer and contemplating my future at Mason. The promotion was tempting, a chance to implement real change from a position of authority. I could establish better practices, ensure healthy work-life balance for the whole department, and continue working with a system I knew inside and out. But questions lingered. Was this simply a band-aid to keep me from leaving? Would the company culture truly change, or would I find myself fighting the same battles from a different position? And most importantly, could I trust Sarah's apparent change of heart? I called my sister Andrea for advice. They're offering you a director position? She asked after I explained the situation. That's a big jump. I know. It's more than I expected. But you're hesitant. I'm cautious, I clarified. The culture at Mason is deeply ingrained. I'm not sure one new position can change that. Andrea was silent for a moment. Remember when Dad taught us chess? She finally asked. Sure, why? He always said you can't change the game unless you're in a position to move the pieces. This sounds like your chance to get your hands on the board? Maybe, I acknowledged. But what if they're just trying to keep me from walking away after what happened? Then you still win. They're acknowledging your value and giving you authority. Use it. Make the changes you want to see. If it doesn't work out, you'll be even more marketable with director on your resume. Her logic was sound, as usual. When did my little sister get so wise? Probably around the time my big brother was working 60-hour weeks instead of calling me. She teased. We chatted a while longer about her family and our parents before hanging up. Her perspective had helped clarify my thinking. I didn't have to trust Sarah completely or believe the company had suddenly transformed overnight. I just needed to decide if this was an opportunity worth pursuing, a chance to effect real change from within. The next morning, I walked into Sarah's office with my decision made. I'm accepting the position, I stated without preamble. But I have conditions. Sarah raised an eyebrow but gestured for me to continue. First, I want a formal policy implemented regarding overtime and weekend work. One with teeth. No more expecting people to sacrifice their personal lives for routine projects. Reasonable. Sarah nodded. What else? Second, I want a budget allocated specifically for knowledge transfer and documentation across all systems, not just Mason metrics. That includes time for senior developers to train others, not just adding it to their existing workload. That aligns with the new role's objectives. Third, I want a complete review of our project estimation process. We consistently underestimate time requirements, which creates the pressure that leads to overtime. Sarah made notes as I spoke. Also reasonable. Anything else? Last one, I said firmly. I want a company-wide vacation policy that guarantees approved time off cannot be rescinded except in genuine emergencies, which must be defined explicitly, not left to managerial discretion. This last one drew a slight grimace from Sarah, but she nodded. I'll need executive approval for that. But I'll support it. Then we have a deal. I extended my hand. As we shook on it, I felt a weight lifting, the accumulated pressure of 6 years of overwork and underappreciation finally beginning to dissipate. The transition to my new role wasn't seamless. Some managers resisted the changes I proposed, particularly the restrictions on overtime and weekend work. They had grown accustomed to squeezing extra hours from their teams to meet unrealistic deadlines. I had options now. My skills were valuable. My resume impressive. I could find a position at a company with a healthier culture, one that truly valued work-life balance rather than just paying lip service to the concept, or I could stay and try to change Mason from within. The Knowledge Dependency Initiative was a start, but there was much more to be done. Could I be the catalyst for broader cultural change? As the plane began its descent into Boston, I made my decision. Monday morning would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one way or another. When I walked into the office on Monday, there was a noticeable shift in atmosphere. Colleagues who had barely acknowledged me in the past now greeted me warmly, some even stopping to chat about my vacation. Word had spread about the Mason metrics meltdown and how the documentation and training I'd initiated had saved the day. I made my way to my desk, finding a handwritten note propped against my monitor. Marcus, please see me in my office when you arrive. Sarah. The moment of truth had arrived. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and headed toward the executive wing, ready to face whatever came next. I knocked on Sarah's office door, steeling myself for whatever confrontation. Might await. Come in, she called. I entered to find Sarah standing by her window, gazing out at the Boston skyline. She turned as the door closed behind me, her expression unreadable. Welcome back, Marcus. How was the anniversary celebration? Not what I expected as an opening question. It was wonderful, thank you. My parents were thrilled to have the whole family together. Sarah nodded, gesturing for me to take a seat as she returned to her desk chair. I imagine they were. An awkward silence stretched between us. I waited, letting her take the lead. Finally, she sighed. I owe you a proper apology. My email didn't adequately express how wrong I was, both in denying your vacation and in circumventing the protocols you established for Mason metrics. I appreciate that, I said carefully. The system crash was... She paused, searching for the right word. Illuminating. 6 hours of downtime during Q2 closing. The executives were not pleased. I could only imagine the chaos that had ensued. Quarter end was always high pressure, with departments scrambling to finalize numbers and generate reports. Kevin and Alicia performed admirably, she continued, but it was clear that they were operating from your playbook, not their own expertise. The documentation you provided was their lifeline. I nodded. They're quick learners, but Mason metrics is complex. It takes time to develop true proficiency. Yes, I understand that now. Sarah opened a folder on her desk. Which brings me to the purpose of this meeting. The dependency issue you identified, or rather that the system identified, is real and requires addressing. My heart sank. Slightly. Was this where she asked me to spend the next several months creating exhaustive documentation? To train my own replacements? I've spoken with the executive team, and we've decided to create a new position. She slid a document across the desk toward me. Director of Systems Architecture, reporting directly to the CTO. The role would oversee all internal systems, with a focus on knowledge distribution, redundancy planning, and sustainable development practices. I stared at the job description, momentarily speechless. This was no token promotion. It was a significant step up in both responsibility and authority. We'd like to offer the position to you, Sarah said, her tone now entirely professional. Your experience with Mason metrics has highlighted the need for someone who understands not just the technical aspects of our systems, but the human components as well. Someone who can ensure we don't create these dangerous dependencies in the future. I don't know what to say, I admitted, scanning the details of the offer. The salary was nearly double my current compensation, with additional benefits and equity options. You don't need to decide immediately. Take some time to... Why? I interrupted, looking up from the papers. Why this sudden change? A week ago, you were denying my vacation request and questioning my value to the company. Sarah's expression tightened briefly, then relaxed into something akin to respect. Fair question. The answer has several parts. She leaned back in her chair. First, the system crash demonstrated the vulnerability we've created by allowing a single person to become indispensable to critical infrastructure. That's a failure of management, not your failure. I couldn't argue with that assessment. Second, your solution, the knowledge dependency score and subsequent training initiative, showed me you're thinking about systemic solutions, not just technical ones. That's the kind of thinking we need at the director level. Again, reasonable. And third, she continued with a hint of a smile, I received some rather pointed feedback from the executive team about my handling of your vacation request. Apparently, several of them have worked with you over the years and were not pleased to learn I'd denied time off to, as CFO Peterson put it, the guy who keeps the lights on around here. That made me chuckle. Peterson had always been direct. So to be completely transparent, Sarah concluded, this offer comes from a recognition of your value, a need to address a significant vulnerability, and yes, some pressure from above to not lose you over my mismanagement. Does that answer your question? Her honesty was refreshing. It does. Thank you. Take the day to review the offer. We can discuss any questions tomorrow. I nodded, gathering the papers. As I stood to leave, Sarah added, One more thing, Marcus. Whatever you decide, there will be changes to how we operate. No more solo heroes working nights and weekends. No more single points of failure. That era ends now. regardless of who takes this position. I couldn't agree more, I replied sincerely. I spent that evening in my apartment reviewing the offer and contemplating my future at Mason. The promotion was tempting, a chance to implement real change from a position of authority. I could establish better practices, ensure healthy work-life balance for the whole department, and continue working with a system I knew inside and out. But questions lingered. Was this simply a band-aid to keep me from leaving? Would the company culture truly change, or would I find myself fighting the same battles from a different position? And most importantly, could I trust Sarah's apparent change of heart? I called my sister Andrea for advice. "They're offering you a director position?" she asked after I explained the situation. "That's a big jump." "I know. It's more than I expected." "But you're hesitant." "I'm cautious," I clarified. "The culture at Mason is deeply ingrained. I'm not sure one new position can change that." Andrea was silent for a moment. "Remember when Dad taught us chess?" she finally asked. "Sure, why?" "He always said you can't change the game unless you're in a position to move the pieces. This sounds like your chance to get your hands on the board." "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But what if they're just trying to keep me from walking away after what happened? Then you still win. They're acknowledging your value and giving you authority. Use it. Make the changes you want to see. If it doesn't work out, you'll be even more marketable with director on your resume." Her logic was sound, as usual. When did my little sister get so wise? Probably around the time my big brother was working 60-hour weeks instead of calling me, she teased. We chatted a while longer about her family and our parents before hanging up. Her perspective had helped clarify my thinking. I didn't have to trust Sarah completely or believe the company had suddenly transformed overnight. I just needed to decide if this was an opportunity worth pursuing, a chance to effect real change from within. The next morning, I walked into Sarah's office with my decision made. "I'm accepting the position," I stated without preamble. "But I have conditions." Sarah raised an eyebrow but gestured for me to continue. "First, I want a formal policy implemented regarding overtime and weekend work. One with teeth. No more expecting people to sacrifice their personal lives for routine projects." "Reasonable," Sarah nodded. "What else?" "Second, I want a budget allocated specifically for knowledge transfer and documentation across all systems, not just Mason metrics. That includes time for senior developers to train others, not just adding it to their existing workload. That aligns with the new role's objectives. Third, I want a complete review of our project estimation process. We consistently underestimate time requirements, which creates the pressure that leads to overtime." Sarah made notes as I spoke. "Also reasonable. Anything else?" "Last one," I said firmly. "I want a company-wide vacation policy that guarantees approved time off cannot be rescinded except in genuine emergencies, which must be defined explicitly, not left to managerial discretion." This last one drew a slight grimace from Sarah, but she nodded. "I'll need executive approval for that. But I'll support it. Then we have a deal." I extended my hand. As we shook on it, I felt a weight lifting, the accumulated pressure of 6 years of overwork and underappreciation finally beginning to dissipate. The transition to my new role wasn't seamless. Some managers resisted the changes I proposed, particularly the restrictions on overtime and weekend work. They had grown accustomed to squeezing extra hours from their teams to meet unrealistic deadlines. Camila Reyes nodded. "We've been very impressed with the efficiency metrics your team has achieved while simultaneously reducing overtime and burnout. It's a balance many tech companies struggle to maintain. Your knowledge dependency scoring system is particularly innovative," added Paul Morrison. "We're interested in implementing similar approaches across our portfolio companies." The conversation continued for nearly an hour. with the Vertex representatives asking detailed questions about Mason metrics, our knowledge-sharing practices, and the cultural changes we'd implemented. I answered honestly, proud of what we'd accomplished, but increasingly concerned about what this acquisition would mean for the principles we'd fought to establish. As the meeting concluded, Franklin walked me to the door. "We'll be announcing the acquisition to the company tomorrow. I'd appreciate your support in maintaining a positive tone with your team." "Of course," I replied automatically, still processing the news. "Will there be retention arrangements for key personnel?" "Vertex values our talent," he assured me. "They'll be extending offers to all current employees with special provisions. For leadership positions, you'll receive details in the next few days." That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop, a half-eaten dinner pushed aside. I'd spent the past 2 hours researching Vertex Global's track record with acquisitions. The pattern was concerning. They typically maintained the acquired companies as separate entities initially, but gradually centralized functions, standardized systems, and ultimately absorbed the unique cultures into the Vertex way of doing things. Would all our hard work to create a healthier work environment be undone? Would Mason metrics be dismantled and replaced with Vertex's proprietary systems? Would our team be scattered across different divisions? My phone rang, Sarah calling. "I just heard," she said without preamble. "Franklin filled me in after your meeting." "What do you think?" I asked. "I think corporate acquisitions are rarely about preserving the acquired company's culture. But I also think we have leverage." "How so?" "Mason metrics. From what Franklin shared, Vertex is particularly interested in our systems and methodology. They wouldn't want to risk losing the architects of those systems." She was right. During the meeting, the Vertex representatives had been especially curious about how we'd achieved our results, both technically and culturally. "So, what's your plan?" I asked, knowing Sarah well enough by now to recognize when she was strategizing. "We present a united front. Make it clear that our people and our practices are a package deal. They want our systems. They get our work-life balance policies, too." We talked for another hour, outlining a strategy to protect what we'd built. By the time we hung up, I felt more centered, more determined. This wasn't necessarily the end of our work. It might just be the next challenge, the company-wide announcement. The following day was met with the expected mix of excitement, anxiety, and questions. Franklin presented the acquisition as a tremendous opportunity for growth and expanded resources. Representatives from Vertex emphasized their commitment to preserving Mason's talent and innovations. In the days that followed, I received my retention offer, a 3-year contract with a substantial salary increase and equity in Vertex Global. The paperwork included glowing language about my contributions and Vertex's excitement to have me join their leadership team. What it didn't include was any mention of maintaining our current work practices or policies. Rather than signing immediately, I requested a meeting with Camilla Reyes, who would be overseeing the integration of Mason into the Vertex family. She agreed to meet the following week. In the meantime, I gathered data. I compiled metrics showing the correlation between our work-life balance initiatives and productivity. I documented the reduction in system failures since implementing our knowledge-sharing practices. I collected testimonials from team members about how our policies had improved both their work quality and personal lives. I also reached out discreetly to employees at other companies Vertex had acquired, seeking insights into how the integration had affected their daily work experience. The responses varied, but a common theme emerged. Vertex ultimately standardized everything, regardless of what promises were made during acquisition. The day of my meeting with Camilla arrived. I entered the conference room armed with my research and a clear set of conditions I wasn't willing to compromise on. "Thank you for making time to meet," Camilla said, her professional smile perfectly calibrated. "Have you had a chance to review your offer?" "I have," I replied. The financial terms are generous. But? She raised an eyebrow, clearly sensing my hesitation. But I have concerns about preserving the work culture and systems we've built at Mason. The offer doesn't address those elements. Camilla's smile tightened, slightly. Vertex has its own corporate culture, of course, but we value the unique strengths of our acquisitions. There's always a period of adjustment as we integrate. I understand. However, I believe our work-life balance policies and knowledge sharing practices are directly responsible for our success. I opened my laptop and pulled up my presentation. I've prepared some data I'd like to share with you. For the next 30 minutes, I walked her through the metrics: productivity increases, reduced system failures, lower turnover, and higher customer satisfaction, all correlated with the changes we'd implemented over the past 2 years. These are impressive results, Camilla acknowledged when I finished. But Vertex has standardized systems for a reason. Uniformity across our divisions allows for easier management and resource allocation. I'm not suggesting that Vertex change its entire approach, I countered. I'm proposing that our division be allowed to maintain our current practices as a pilot program. If the results continue to be superior, you might consider implementing similar approaches elsewhere. Camilla studied me thoughtfully. You care deeply about this. I do. Because I've seen both sides. I've experienced the burnout culture that treats people as replaceable resources, and I've helped build something better. I'm not interested in going backward. And if we can't accommodate these conditions, I met her gaze steadily. Then I would have to decline the offer, and I suspect several key members of my team would follow suit. It wasn't an idle threat. I had discussed the situation with my core team leads, and most had expressed similar concerns about the acquisition's impact on our work environment. Camilla was silent for a long moment. I'll need to discuss this with the integration team. In the meantime, I'd like to see more detailed documentation on exactly what policies you consider non-negotiable. It wasn't a victory, but it was an opening. I left the meeting cautiously optimistic that a compromise might be possible. That evening, I met with Sarah at a quiet bar near the office to compare notes. She had had a similar conversation with Paul Morrison. They're resistant, but not dismissive, she reported, sipping her wine. They seem genuinely interested in understanding why our system works before dismantling it. The question is whether that interest translates into action, I replied. Corporate inertia is powerful. It's easier to maintain existing systems than adapt to new ones, even if the new ones are demonstrably better. Sarah smiled. Remember when you added that knowledge dependency score to Mason metrics? Sometimes you have to show people what failure looks like before they appreciate the value of your solution. Are you suggesting we sabotage Vertex's integration? I asked, half joking. Not at all. I'm suggesting we demonstrate the value of our approach in ways they can't ignore. Results speak louder than presentations. She was right, as usual. If we could continue delivering exceptional results during the transition period, we would have a stronger case for maintaining our practices. The following weeks were intense as the acquisition moved forward. Vertex representatives swarmed the office, conducting interviews, auditing systems, and mapping processes. Every department was scrutinized, none more thoroughly than mine. I made myself and my team fully available, answering questions, providing documentation, and demonstrating our systems. I particularly emphasized the interconnection between our technical architecture and our work practices, how one supported the other. The knowledge dependency scores became a focal point of interest. Several Vertex executives were intrigued by how we'd quantified something that was typically treated as a subjective concern. They asked detailed questions about the algorithm, how the scores were calculated, and how we used them to make staffing and training decisions. This could be applied across all our divisions, remarked Trevor Bailey, Vertex's CIO, during one demonstration. It addresses a pain point we've struggled with for years. It works because it's part of a larger system, I explained. The scores are valuable, but they're most effective when combined with our training initiatives, documentation requirements, and work-life balance policies. It's an ecosystem, not just a metric, Trevor nodded thoughtfully. I'd like to see a proposal for how this might scale across Vertex. Not immediately, but once the integration is complete. It was the first concrete indication that some elements of our approach might survive the acquisition. I seized the opportunity. I'd be happy to develop that proposal. In fact, I believe a phased implementation could begin during the integration process, using our division as a pilot. The seed was planted. Over the next several days, I discreetly gathered allies among the Vertex team, executives who saw the potential value in our approach and were willing to champion it in internal discussions. 2 weeks before the acquisition was to be finalized, I received a new contract offer. This one included an addendum: Leadership of the Mason Work Model Initiative, a 2-year program to evaluate and potentially implement Mason's work-life balance and knowledge-sharing practices across select Vertex divisions. It wasn't a guarantee of permanent change, but it was a chance to prove on a larger scale what we demonstrated at Mason, that treating employees as whole people rather than resources, that valuing their time and well-being could lead to better results for everyone. Signed the contract. The transition wasn't seamless. There were compromises, adjustments, and occasional conflicts as Mason became part of the Vertex machine. Some policies changed, some team members left, some initiatives were shelved, but the core of what we'd built remained intact. The Mason division maintained its identity within the larger corporation, serving as a test case for a different approach to tech workplace culture. 6 months into the integration, the first comparative metrics came in. The Mason division had the lowest turnover rate, the highest employee satisfaction scores, and productivity that matched or exceeded other divisions, all while maintaining standard 40-hour work weeks and respecting vacation time. Trevor Bailey, who had become a key ally, arranged for me to present these results to Vertex's executive leadership team. As I prepared for the presentation, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, from an overworked developer who couldn't take a week off for his parents' anniversary, to potentially influencing the work culture of one of the largest tech companies in the country. From a system that failed because it didn't value the human element, to advocating for that human element at the highest levels of corporate leadership. I opened my presentation with a simple statement: technology exists to serve people, not the other way around. When we forget that, when we sacrifice the humans to the system, both eventually fail. But when we design systems that respect human needs and limitations, everyone benefits: employees, companies, and customers alike. As I looked out at the row of executives, I saw skepticism in some faces, interest in others. Change at this scale wouldn't happen overnight. It would be a marathon, not a sprint. But that was okay. I had learned the value of patience, of strategic persistence, and most importantly, I had learned that sustainable change doesn't come from heroic individual efforts or burnout-inducing sprints. It comes from building systems that encourage and reinforce the behaviors we want to see. As I concluded my presentation, a message appeared on my phone, a photo from my sister of my parents on their anniversary trip to Alaska, beaming from the deck of a cruise ship. The caption read, "They're already planning next year's adventure. Block your calendar now." I smiled, knowing with absolute certainty that I would be there, not despite my job, but because I had helped create a workplace where such things were valued, not just in theory, but in practice. Some systems are worth breaking so that better ones can take their place. Some failures lead to the most important successes, and sometimes the person who needs to change the system most is the one who has been enabling it all along. 1 year into the Vertex global acquisition, what had begun as a small pilot program the Mason Work Model Initiative, had expanded to 5 divisions across the corporation. The results were consistent: improved retention, maintained or increased productivity, and significantly higher employee satisfaction scores. My presentation to the executive team had sparked enough interest to warrant continued investment in the approach. But success at this scale brought new challenges and unexpected complications. On a rainy Thursday morning, I arrived at Vertex headquarters in downtown Boston for my quarterly review meeting with Trevor Bailey, the CIO who had become my primary advocate within the executive structure. These meetings typically focused on metrics and expansion plans for the initiative. Today, however, Trevor's usually relaxed demeanor seemed strained. "Everything okay?" I asked as I settled into a chair across from his desk. Trevor sighed, pushing aside a stack of reports. "We've hit some resistance from regional operations. Bradley Harmon is pushing back hard against implementing the model in his divisions." Bradley Harmon was Vertex's Executive Vice President of Regional Operations, overseeing 12 divisions across the country. His influence within the company was substantial, and his management style was notoriously traditional, focused on rigid metrics and unwavering deadlines. "What's his specific objection?" I asked, though I could already guess. "He claims the model is coddling employees and creating unrealistic expectations," Trevor replied, making air quotes. He sent a 15-page report to the CEO arguing that our positive results are temporary anomalies that will reverse once the novelty wears off. I'd encountered this argument before, the notion that treating employees humanely was somehow a luxury rather than a fundamental component of sustainable success. "Has he reviewed the longitudinal data? We're now showing consistent results across multiple quarters." Trevor nodded. "He has, but he's dismissing it as relevant only to specialized, technical divisions. Claims his operational teams function differently and require more traditional accountability measures. In other words, he wanted to keep overworking his people and managing through fear of consequences rather than engagement and support." "What does the CEO think?" I asked. "Eliza is data-driven, which works in our favor. But Bradley has been with Vertex for 20 years. They came up together. She values his perspective." This was politics, pure and simple. No matter how compelling our results, relationships, and established power structures would influence the decision-making process. "So what's our next move?" I asked. Trevor leaned forward. "Eliza has proposed a direct test, one of Bradley's divisions against one of our Mason model divisions, running parallel projects with similar parameters. A head-to-head comparison." Pulse quickened. "Which division is he?" "Northwest Operations, based in Seattle. They're launching a new customer management platform next quarter, same timeline as our Northeast Division's inventory management system rollout. Similar team sizes, similar complexity." It was a fair comparison, which was both good and concerning. Fair meant we had a genuine chance to prove our model's superiority, but it also meant no excuses if we underperformed. Bradley is confident. His team will deliver faster results with their all-hands-on-deck approach, Trevor continued. He's already setting expectations with Eliza that his division will outperform ours. "And if they do?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "Then the Mason initiative gets scaled back to just the original divisions. No further expansion. The stakes couldn't be higher. This wasn't just about a management methodology anymore. It was about the working lives of thousands of employees across Vertex Global. If we lost this head-to-head comparison, the message would be clear. Burnout culture wins. I want to lead the Northeast project personally," I said decisively. Trevor raised an eyebrow. "You've been functioning more as a program director lately. Are you sure you want to step back into direct project management?" "This is too important to delegate. I need to ensure we're implementing every aspect of the model correctly." What I didn't say was that I also needed to guarantee no one on my team fell back into old habits under pressure. The temptation to revert to the crunch time mentality would be strong with so much visibility on this project. All right, Trevor agreed. I'll make the arrangements. But Marcus, you should know, Bradley is assigning Diane Foster to lead his team. I tried to hide my reaction, but Trevor noticed. You know her? By reputation, I replied carefully. She's known for delivering projects ahead of schedule, regardless of the human cost. They call her the deadline enforcer. That's putting it mildly, Trevor said grimly. She's burned through more team members than anyone in the company, but her projects come in on time and under budget, which is all Bradley cares about. The challenge had just become significantly more difficult. Diane's methods were legendary: mandatory weekend work, midnight deployment sessions, performance reviews that penalized anything less than total dedication to the project. She represented everything I had fought against at Mason. Well, I said, forcing a confidence I didn't entirely feel. This should be interesting. The following Monday, I met with the Northeast Division team that would be working on the inventory management system. Many were former Mason employees who had experienced our cultural transformation firsthand, but others were Vertex veterans accustomed to more traditional approaches. I'll be direct, I began after introducing myself. This project has become a test case for two competing work models. Our approach, the Mason model, is being measured against a more conventional method that many of you have experienced before. I outlined the parameters of the project and the comparison being made, not hiding any of the implications. The easy thing would be to fall back on old patterns, to ask for overtime, to expect weekend work, to prioritize the deadline above all else. I want to be absolutely clear. We will not do that. A few team members exchanged skeptical glances. Instead, I continued. We will demonstrate that well-rested, supported employees working reasonable hours can deliver results that match or exceed those produced under duress. We will plan meticulously, communicate effectively, and respect each other's boundaries. And we will deliver an exceptional product on schedule. Jason Reynolds, a Vertex veteran who had transferred to the Mason division 6 months earlier, raised his hand. With all due respect, Marcus, we're up against Diane Foster. Her team will be working 80-hour weeks if that's what it takes to win. No, I acknowledged. And that's precisely why this test matters so much. We need to prove that her approach isn't just unnecessary, it's counterproductive in the long run. Megan Patel, one of my original team members from Mason, spoke up. I've worked both ways. I believe in what we're doing here. But we'll need to be smarter and more efficient than we've ever been. Exactly, I agreed. This isn't about working less. It's about working better, using our time more effectively, communicating more clearly, and supporting each other more completely. Over the next 2 weeks, we developed our project plan with meticulous attention to detail. Every task was broken down, every dependency mapped, every risk identified and mitigated. We built in buffer time for unexpected challenges and established clear communication protocols for issues that might arise. Most importantly, we created a knowledge-sharing system that ensured no single team member became a bottleneck. Everyone was trained on at least 2 areas of the project, and documentation was created in real time as development progressed. Throughout this planning phase, rumors filtered in about Diane's team in Seattle. They had jumped straight into development, working late hours from day one to get a head start. Bradley was already sending updates to the executive team about their impressive early progress. They're sprinting before the race has even started, Megan observed during one of our planning sessions. They'll burn out by the halfway point. Maybe, I cautioned, but we can't count on that. We need to focus on our approach, not theirs. As we moved into the development phase, our methodical planning began to pay dividends. With clear requirements and well-defined tasks, the team moved efficiently through the backlog. Daily stand-up meetings kept everyone aligned, and our bi-weekly retrospectives allowed us to continuously refine our process. True to our principles, everyone worked regular 40-hour weeks. No evenings, no weekends, no holiday coverage. When technical challenges arose, as they inevitably did, we addressed them through collaborative problem-solving rather than brute force overtime. Midway through the project timeline, Trevor arranged a joint status meeting with both teams reporting to Eliza Chen, the CEO. It was the first direct comparison of our progress. Diane went first, presenting an impressive array of completed features and metrics. Her team had indeed achieved significant progress, with nearly 70% of the customer management platform functionality in place. We're tracking to complete development 2 weeks ahead of schedule, she concluded confidently. Testing will begin next month, with deployment set for June 15th, a full week before the target date. Eliza nodded approvingly. Impressive work, Diane. Bradley was right about your team's capabilities. When my turn came, I took a different approach. Rather than focusing solely on completed features, I presented our holistic progress, development, milestones, yes, but also our test coverage, documentation status, and knowledge distribution across the team. We're at 65% feature completion, I acknowledged, slightly behind Northwest's pace. However, our code quality metrics are exceptional, with 92% test coverage and minimal technical debt. We're on track for our scheduled completion date with no overtime hours logged. I emphasized the last point, knowing it was the core of our value proposition. Diane's team was delivering faster, but at what cost? Eliza seemed interested, but not entirely convinced. The results speak for themselves. Marcus, Northwest is ahead of schedule while maintaining comparable quality metrics. With respect, Eliza, we're only at the midpoint, I countered. The true measure isn't just how quickly features are implemented, but how smoothly the system functions after deployment, how effectively it meets user needs, and how sustainable. The development process proves to be over time. She conceded the point with a slight nod. We'll reassess at project completion. Thank you both for your updates. As the meeting concluded, Diane approached me in the hallway. Impressive spin, Walsh, she said with a thin smile. But at the end of the day, results are what matter. My team will deliver a week early. Will yours? We'll deliver on schedule, I replied evenly. With a team that isn't exhausted, resentful, or looking for new jobs, her smile never faltered. Save the warm and fuzzy talk for your team-building exercises. This is business. Deadlines matter more than feelings. People aren't resources to be burned through, Diane. They're professionals whose skills and well-being are directly connected to the quality of their work. She shrugged dismissively. Tell that to Bradley when my team outperforms yours. May the best management style win. As she walked away, I wondered if there was any way to bridge such fundamentally different perspectives on what constituted good leadership. For Diane and Bradley, success was measured solely in deadlines met and features delivered, regardless of the human cost. For me, the process mattered as much as the outcome. The final 6 weeks of the project were intense but controlled. Our team maintained their regular hours while making steady progress. We encountered the usual challenges: integration issues, unexpected edge cases, last-minute requirement changes, but our robust planning and knowledge-sharing practices allowed us to adapt without resorting to crisis mode. Reports from Seattle painted a different picture. Diane's team was working nights and weekends to maintain their accelerated schedule. Several team members had taken sick leave, and 2 had resigned outright, but they were still on track to finish early, as promised. 3 days before our scheduled completion date, we received unexpected news. Diane's team had encountered a critical defect during final testing. A fundamental design flaw in their database architecture was causing data corruption under certain conditions. They had missed it earlier because their accelerated testing hadn't included sufficient edge case scenarios. Fixing the issue would require significant refactoring and delay their deployment by at least 2 weeks, possibly longer. Suddenly, their early progress meant nothing. They would miss their deadline despite all the overtime and personal sacrifices. Our team, meanwhile, completed development on schedule. Our comprehensive testing made possible by the time we'd allocated for quality assurance rather than rushing to add features, caught potential issues early when they were still easy to address. The final presentation to Eliza and the executive team was scheduled for the day after our deployment. Both projects would be evaluated not just on timeline adherence, but on system stability, code quality, and team health. Diane went first again, visibly tense as she explained the database issue and the resulting delay. Despite this setback, she concluded, we still delivered a robust system that meets all requirements. The delay was unfortunate but not indicative of our overall methodology. Bradley jumped in to support her. Every project encounters challenges. The key is how quickly and effectively we address them, which Diane's team has done admirably. When my turn came, I focused on the complete picture, not just that we had delivered on time, but how we had done it. The Northeast team has successfully deployed the inventory management system on schedule, with all requirements met and no critical defects identified. System performance exceeds specifications, and user feedback from initial training sessions has been overwhelmingly positive. I displayed our metrics, not just development statistics, but team health indicators. Throughout this project, we maintained standard 40-hour work weeks. No team members worked evenings or weekends. We had zero turnover, zero sick days attributed to work stress and team satisfaction surveys showing 90% positive responses. Eliza studied the data carefully. So you're suggesting that by focusing on sustainable practices, you actually achieved more reliable results than the accelerated approach? The evidence speaks for itself, I replied. When we prevent burnout, knowledge remains distributed. Team members can think clearly, and quality doesn't suffer in the rush to meet artificial deadlines. Bradley scoffed. One database issue doesn't invalidate years of proven methodology. Diane's team would have delivered early if not for an unforeseeable technical challenge. Was it really unforeseeable? I asked calmly. Or was it missed because testing was rushed and team members were too exhausted to catch subtle design flaws? Comprehensive testing requires fresh eyes and clear thinking, exactly what's compromised when pushing people beyond reasonable limits. The debate continued for nearly an hour, with passionate arguments from both sides. In the end, Eliza called for a more extensive evaluation before making any decisions about expanding or contracting the Mason Model Initiative. We'll conduct a 6-month follow-up assessment of both systems, she declared, measuring not just initial delivery, but ongoing maintenance costs, user satisfaction, and team retention. This isn't just about how quickly we can build something. It's about building the right thing in a sustainable way. It wasn't an outright victory, but it was a fair approach, and fairness was all we needed for our model to prove its worth. We left the meeting. Trevor clapped me on the shoulder. Well done! You kept your cool and let the results speak for themselves. It's still an uphill battle, I admitted. Bradley has a lot of influence here. True, but Eliza respects data above all else, and your team just provided some very compelling data points. 6 months later, the follow-up assessment confirmed what we had demonstrated during development. The inventory management system required minimal ongoing maintenance, with no critical defects reported after deployment. User adoption exceeded targets, and the team remained intact, with several members even turning down opportunities elsewhere to continue working in our division. Diane's system, while eventually successful, had required 3 additional patches after deployment and continued to experience periodic issues that necessitated weekend support. 5 more team members had left since the project concluded, citing burnout and dissatisfaction with the work environment. Based on these results, Eliza made her decision. The Mason work model would become Vertex Global's recommended approach, to be implemented across all divisions over the next 2 years. Bradley and his supporters received the directive with visible reluctance, but the CEO's message was clear. The data had spoken. As I shared the news with my team, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From a small act of resistance, adding a knowledge dependency score to prevent a denied vacation, to transforming the work culture of an entire corporation. From one overworked developer standing up for himself to thousands of employees, benefiting from more sustainable practices. Systems can change when people refuse to be consumed by them. Sometimes the failures we fear most become the catalysts for the improvements we need most desperately. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Planning our 45th anniversary trip. Alaska was amazing, but we're thinking Hawaii this time. You'll join us, right? I smiled as I typed my response. Wouldn't miss it for the world, already blocking the dates. Some promises are meant to be kept, no matter what systems try to stand in their way. 5 years after that pivotal vacation to my parents' anniversary celebration, I found myself in a position I never could have imagined. My official title at Vertex Global was now Chief Workplace Culture Officer, a role created specifically to oversee the company-wide implementation of what had evolved from the Mason work model into the Vertex Sustainable Excellence Program. The transformation hadn't been easy or universal. Some divisions embraced the changes enthusiastically, experiencing immediate improvements in team cohesion and productivity. Others resisted, clinging to traditional approaches despite mounting evidence of their ineffectiveness. Bradley Harmon had eventually taken early retirement rather than adapt his management style, and several other executives had followed suit. But the data was undeniable. Across the company, divisions operating under our principles showed lower turnover, fewer critical defects in deployed systems, higher customer satisfaction, and, most surprisingly to the traditionalists, comparable or better productivity metrics compared to their all-hands-on-deck counterparts. On a crisp autumn morning, I stood at the podium of the main conference hall at Vertex headquarters, facing an audience of over 300 people, team leaders from every division, across the country who had gathered for our annual leadership summit. 5 years ago, I began, many of you sat in this same room and listened skeptically as I proposed what seemed like a radical notion, that treating employees as whole human beings rather than expendable resources might actually improve our bottom line. A ripple of knowing laughter spread through the crowd. Some of you were immediate allies, recognizing in our approach the validation of what you already believed about effective leadership. Others were understandably cautious, waiting for evidence before changing established practices. And yes, some were outright opponents, convinced that sustainable hours and respect for personal boundaries were luxuries we couldn't afford in a competitive marketplace. I paused, looking out at the diverse group of leaders who had journeyed through this transformation with me. Today, I'm not here to rehash those debates or claim victory for one philosophy over another. I'm here to talk about what we've learned, where we've succeeded, where we've struggled, and most importantly, where we go from here. For the next hour, I shared both quantitative results and qualitative insights from our 5-year journey. The statistics were compelling: a 42% reduction in turnover across the company, a 38% decrease in critical post-deployment defects, and customer satisfaction scores that had risen from 78% to 91%. But the stories were even more powerful. Teams that had innovated breakthrough solutions because they had the mental space to think creatively. Employees who had grown into exceptional leaders because they weren't constantly firefighting. Customers who received better products because our people weren't exhausted when building them. As I concluded my presentation, I introduced a panel of team leaders who would share their firsthand experiences implementing the program in different contexts. Before stepping away from the podium, I offered one final thought. The true measure of our success isn't in these metrics, impressive as they are. It's in the lives that have been changed. The parents who no longer miss their children's school, events, the caregivers who can support their aging family members, the individuals who have time to pursue passions outside of work. When we honor the humanity of our colleagues, we not only build better products, we build a better world. The applause was gratifying, But even more meaningful were the conversations that continued throughout the day. Leaders comparing notes, sharing challenges, and collaborating on solutions. The culture shift had taken root, growing beyond any single champion or initiative to become part of Vertex's DNA. That evening, as the summit wrapped up, Eliza Chen, now in her 7th year as CEO, approached me at the reception. Quite a journey. "From that first presentation you gave us," she remarked, sipping her sparkling water. "Hard to believe there was ever a time when we questioned whether this approach could work at scale." "The evidence helped," I acknowledged. "But so did your willingness to give it a fair chance, especially when there was significant opposition." Eliza nodded thoughtfully. "Data-driven decision-making means following the results, even when they challenge your assumptions. Though I'll admit, I didn't anticipate how completely the program would transform our company culture." "Neither did I, honestly. Not at first." "Well, your timing couldn't have been better," she continued. "Which brings me to something I wanted to discuss with you privately." Her tone shifted subtly, becoming more businesslike. I gave her my full attention. "The board has approved our expansion into the European market," she explained. "We'll be establishing regional headquarters in London, with satellite offices in Berlin, Paris, and Stockholm. This represents not just a geographic expansion, but a significant cultural challenge." I immediately understood the implications. European work cultures varied widely from American practices, with different expectations, regulations, and norms. Some countries, like France, had much stronger protections for work-life balance already embedded in their laws. Others had their own challenging patterns that differed from American burnout culture. "You want to ensure the Sustainable Excellence Program translates effectively across these diverse contexts," I surmised. "Precisely. And I want you to lead that effort." I felt a momentary jolt of surprise. "You're asking me to relocate to Europe? For 18 months, yes. Based in London, but traveling regularly to establish the program across all European operations. We need someone who understands the principles at their core, not just the specific implementations we've developed here." It was an exciting opportunity, a chance to test our approach in entirely new cultural contexts, to refine and adapt it to different environments. But it also represented a significant life change, one that would affect more than just me. "I appreciate your confidence in me," I said carefully. "This is a substantial commitment. I'd need to discuss it with Rachel before giving you an answer." Rachel Turner and I had met 3 years earlier when she joined Vertex as a project manager in the Northeast Division. Our shared commitment to sustainable work practices had been just the beginning of our connection. We'd been married for a little over a year now. Eliza smiled understandingly. "Of course. Family considerations are exactly the kind of thing our culture respects now, thanks largely to your influence. Take the time you need to discuss it. The position would start in March of next year, giving you about 5 months to make arrangements if you accept." After the summit concluded, I flew home to Boston, where Rachel and I had purchased a small but comfortable condo near the Charles River. As we sat on our balcony that weekend watching sailboats glide across the water, I shared Eliza's proposal. "London," Rachel mused, considering the possibility. "I've always wanted to live abroad." "It would be a significant change," I cautioned. "New country, new colleagues, new challenges, and quite a bit of travel involved for me." Rachel took a sip of her coffee, thoughtful. "My role is mostly remote. These days anyway. The development team is spread across 3 time zones already. European time might actually make it easier to coordinate with our West Coast offices." She had a point. As a senior project manager overseeing distributed teams, her physical location mattered less than her availability during core collaboration. Hours. "So you're open to it?" I asked, somewhat surprised by her immediate receptivity. "More than open. I'm excited by the possibility." Her eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Think about it, Marcus. This isn't just a career opportunity. It's a chance to experience different cultures, different perspectives on work and life. We've talked about wanting more adventure before we settle down and start a family. I smiled, feeling a weight lift. I thought I might have to be more convincing. Rachel laughed. After all we've been through building this program, did you really think I'd be the one to say work should come before life experiences? Besides, this particular work aligns perfectly with both our values. It's not just a job, it's continuing the mission we both believe in. Over the next few weeks, we researched living in London, explored the logistics of an international move, and had several follow-up conversations with Eliza and the European expansion team. By Thanksgiving, we had made our decision. We would accept the assignment and relocate to London in March. The months of preparation flew by. We found tenants for our Boston condo, researched neighborhoods in London, and began the process of obtaining necessary visas and work permits. Throughout, Vertex provided comprehensive support, another benefit of a company culture that truly valued its people. My parents were supportive but understandably concerned about us moving so far away. During our Christmas visit to Michigan, my father pulled me aside while we were clearing dishes after dinner. "Europe, huh? That's quite a change from the days when we couldn't even get you to take a week off for our anniversary." I smiled at the reference to what had become a pivotal moment in our family mythology. Life has a way of coming full circle. If Sarah hadn't denied that vacation request, I might never have changed the system, never met Rachel, never ended up with this opportunity. "Funny how things work out," he agreed. "Your mother and I are proud of you, son, not just for your career, success, but for standing up for what matters. That took courage." "I learned it from you," I replied, genuinely meaning it. My father had always modeled the importance of principle over expediency, of doing the right thing even when it was difficult. He clapped me on the shoulder. "Just promise you'll make time for your old parents to visit you in London. We may be pushing 70, but we've still got some adventure left in us." "It's already in the plan," I assured him. "We're counting on you both for the full British experience. Afternoon tea, double-decker bus tours, the works." March arrived with unexpected swiftness. Our last evening in Boston was spent with close friends and colleagues who had been part of our journey from the beginning. Kevin and Alicia from the original Mason team were there, along with Sarah Mitchell, who had remained a valuable ally through the Vertex transition before moving on to a CEO position at a smaller tech firm. "To new adventures," Sarah toasted, raising her glass. "And to the ripple effects none of us could have predicted when Marcus decided to tweak that algorithm all those years ago." "The butterfly effect in action," Kevin added. "One small change in a complex system leading to massive outcomes downstream." Alicia smiled knowingly. "Though I seem to recall it wasn't such a small change. You specifically designed that knowledge. Dependency score to force Sarah to approve your vacation." I laughed, caught in the friendly accusation. "I prefer to think of it as making the system more accurately reflect reality." "Whatever you want to call it," Sarah acknowledged good-naturedly. "It worked. And it taught me a valuable lesson about management that's shaped my entire approach since then." As the evening wound down, Rachel and I shared a quiet moment together, watching our friends who had gathered to send us off. "It's not just a work assignment we're starting," she observed, softly. "It's the next chapter of the story." "Our story," I agreed, squeezing her hand. The London flat Vertex had arranged for us was a spacious two-bedroom apartment in Marylebone, centrally located with easy access to the new European headquarters in Canary Wharf. After a week of settling in and adjusting to the time change, I began meeting with the European leadership team. The cultural differences became apparent immediately. Lars Bergman, our Stockholm office director, was perplexed by many elements of the Sustainable Excellence program. "These practices you're describing, limited working hours, guaranteed vacation time, barriers between work and personal life. These are just basic employment standards in Sweden," he explained during our first meeting. "In fact, Your program doesn't go far enough by our standards. We offer a minimum of 5 weeks paid vacation annually, plus generous parental leave for both mothers and fathers. Conversely, Antonio Rossi from our Milan office expressed skepticism that such approaches could work in the Italian corporate environment. Our challenge isn't just long hours, he explained. It's inefficient processes, bureaucratic obstacles, and a culture that often values appearance over results. People stay late at the office to demonstrate commitment, not necessarily to accomplish more. Each country presented unique challenges and opportunities. The French team had strong legal protections for workers, but struggled with rigid hierarchies that impeded collaboration. The German offices operated efficiently but sometimes lacked flexibility in responding to changing circumstances. It became clear that a one-size-fits-all approach wouldn't work. We needed to adapt the core principles of the program: sustainable workloads, respect for personal boundaries, distributed knowledge, and results-focused management to each cultural context. Over the next 6 months, I traveled extensively throughout Vertex's European operations, listening more than directing, learning the nuances of each workplace culture, and collaborating with local leaders to develop tailored implementations of our principles. In Paris, we focused on flattening hierarchies to improve communication, while maintaining the strong work-life boundaries already established by French labor laws. In Berlin, we introduced more flexibility into their highly structured processes while preserving their admirable efficiency. In Stockholm, we actually learned more than we taught, incorporating several Swedish practices into our global program. Rachel accompanied me on many of these trips, working remotely and exploring each city while I was in meetings. On weekends, we immersed ourselves in local cultures, visiting museums, trying regional cuisines, and occasionally taking side trips to nearby destinations. Work and life were intertwined but balanced, with neither overwhelming the other. By the 9-month mark, the European implementation was showing promising results. Adapted to local contexts, the core principles proved just as effective across different cultures. Employee engagement scores were rising, and early productivity metrics were encouraging. During a video conference with Eliza to provide an update, she expressed particular interest in the cross-cultural insights we were gathering. "This is becoming more than just an implementation of an existing program," she observed. "You're developing an entirely new global framework for sustainable excellence." "It's been eye-opening," I acknowledged. Some practices we considered innovative in the U.S. are standard in Northern Europe. Conversely, certain approaches we take for granted face significant cultural barriers in Southern Europe. We're learning which principles are universal and which need cultural translation. "I want you to document this," Eliza directed, "not just for Vertex but potentially for publication. This could be valuable beyond our organization." The idea of sharing our findings more broadly was appealing. Throughout this journey, I had often thought about all the other companies still operating under outdated management philosophies, all the other employees sacrificing their personal lives for corporate demands. With Rachel's help, I began organizing our observations and insights, backed by data from across multiple countries and cultural contexts. We developed a framework that identified universal principles while acknowledging the need for culturally specific implementations. As our European assignment approached its final months, Rachel and I faced another life-changing development. On a weekend trip to the Scottish Highlands, overlooking a mist-covered loch, Rachel shared the news she had confirmed just before our departure. "We're going to have a baby," she said, her eyes shining with a mix of excitement and wonder. "I'm about 8 weeks along." Joy surged through me as I embraced her, the magnificent landscape around us suddenly seeming even more magical. "This is amazing. How are you feeling?" "A little tired, a little nauseous, but mostly just happy," she replied. "And thinking about timing. The baby would be due around February next year." The realization hit me. Our assignment in London was scheduled to conclude in September, just 5 months before the birth. We would be returning to Boston, settling back into our condo, and adjusting to a new role I was slated to take on at headquarters, all while preparing for parenthood. "We should talk to Eliza," I said. "See if there's flexibility on our return timing. Maybe we could extend a few months, have the baby here, then return when travel would be easier." Rachel nodded. "Or we could consider staying longer. You've built something important here. The European team might benefit from your continued presence during the critical first year of implementation." It was a significant consideration. The program was taking root, but cultural change requires consistent nurturing, especially in its early stages. And personally, the prospect of managing an international move with a newborn was daunting. When I broached the subject with Eliza, during our next video call, her response surprised me. "Actually, I've been meaning to discuss this with you," she said. "The board has been so impressed with the European implementation that they're considering establishing a permanent global workplace culture division with offices in London, Boston, Singapore, and eventually Latin America. We'd want you to continue leading it, based wherever makes the most sense for your family situation." It was an unexpected opportunity, a chance to expand our work globally while maintaining the stability our growing family would need. With the baby coming, having some certainty about our medium-term plans would be helpful, I acknowledged. "Let me discuss it with Rachel and get back to you." That evening, Rachel and I sat in our small garden behind the London flat, considering our options. The sunset painted the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks as a light breeze carried the distant sounds of the city around us. "What do you think?" I asked, watching her face carefully. "Stay in London? Return to Boston? Something else entirely?" Rachel took a thoughtful sip of her herbal tea. "I've loved our time here. The work is meaningful. The experience has been incredible. But I've also been thinking about family. Not just our baby, but our parents too. Yours are getting older. Mine are still active but won't be forever. Do we want our child to grow up knowing their grandparents only through video calls?" It was a valid concern, one I'd been considering as well. For all the wonders of our international adventure, there was something irreplaceable about proximity to family, especially with a child on the way. "What if we proposed a hybrid arrangement?" I suggested. "Based primarily in Boston, but with regular extended work periods in London and eventually the other global offices. Not just quick business trips, but meaningful engagements that allow us to maintain relationships in continuity." Rachel's eyes lit up. "That could work. It would give us the stability of a home base near family while still participating in the global initiative. And it would model for our child that work and family aren't opposing forces. They're parts of a whole life that can complement each other." The solution felt right. Not a compromise between competing priorities, but an integration of values that mattered to us both. Family connections, meaningful work, cultural experiences, and sustainable balance. When I presented the proposal to Eliza, she embraced it enthusiastically. "This actually aligns perfectly with how we envision the global division operating. Each regional hub needs autonomy and cultural grounding, while still maintaining cohesive principles across the organization. Your presence across locations periodically would reinforce that balance." As I hung up from the call, I found myself reflecting on the incredible journey from that moment 6 years ago, when Sarah had denied my vacation request. I had simply wanted to attend my parents' anniversary celebration. I never imagined that standing up for that small but important personal boundary would ultimately lead to transforming workplace culture across a global corporation, meeting the love of my life, and now preparing for parenthood with a career that honored rather than competed with family life. Systems can change when people refuse to be consumed by them. Sometimes the smallest acts of resistance create the most profound transformations. And sometimes, the work-life balance we fight to create becomes the legacy we leave for those who follow, including our own children. As Rachel and I sat in our garden that evening, hands entwined, her free hand occasionally resting on the slight curve of her stomach where our child was growing, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the path that had led us here and excitement for the journey ahead. 2 new chapters, Rachel said softly, echoing our toast from months earlier. And to balance, I added, in all things. 10 years had passed since that pivotal moment when Sarah Mitchell denied my vacation request. A decade of transformation, growth, and unexpected journeys that had led me from an overworked developer to a globally recognized advocate for sustainable workplace practices. Our son, Ethan, now 4 years old, was building a sandcastle on the shores of Lake Michigan while my parents watched adoringly from their beach chairs. Rachel sat beside me on a driftwood log, her hand resting comfortably in mine as we enjoyed the warm July afternoon. "He has your focus," my mother observed, watching. Ethan meticulously shaped the towers of his creation. Once he starts something, nothing distracts him until it's finished. "Let's hope he gets Rachel's sense of balance to go with it," I replied with a self-deprecating smile. Took me long enough to learn that lesson. We had returned to Michigan for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, a milestone celebration that had brought together extended family from across the country. The lakeside cabin, larger than the one from that first significant vacation, was filled with laughter, stories, and the comfortable chaos of 4 generations under one roof. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from Eliza. I hesitated, then deliberately returned it to my pocket without checking it. Whatever it was, it could wait. This moment, with my family enjoying the simple pleasure of a beach day, took precedence over any work matter, no matter how pressing it might seem. Rachel noticed and smiled approvingly. "Remember when you couldn't go 5 minutes without checking your messages?" "Different life," I acknowledged. Different priorities. The hybrid arrangement we had proposed to Vertex had evolved over the years into something that worked remarkably well for both our family and the company. Based primarily in Boston, we spent 2 months each year in London and shorter periods in Singapore and São Paulo, where Vertex had established its Asian and Latin American headquarters. Ethan had grown accustomed to these international sojourns, developing an early appreciation for different cultures and environments. My role had expanded beyond Vertex itself. The book Rachel and I had written, Sustainable Excellence, Transforming Workplace Culture Across Borders, had become something of a sensation in business circles, leading to speaking engagements, consulting opportunities, and eventually, the formation of the Sustainable Workplace Institute, a nonprofit organization dedicated to research and advocacy in the field. The work remained deeply meaningful, but it no longer consumed my identity or dictated my availability to the people I loved. The principles we advocated professionally were the same ones we lived by personally: sustainable balance, clear boundaries, and prioritizing what truly matters. Later that evening, after Ethan had been tucked into bed with a story about brave knights and friendly dragons, the adults gathered on the cabin's expansive deck. The sunset painted the lake in brilliant hues of orange and gold, providing a spectacular backdrop for the occasion. My father stood, raising his glass for a toast. At 72, he moved a bit more slowly than before, but his voice remained strong and clear. 50 years, he began, looking at my mother with undimmed affection. 50 years of building a life together, of facing challenges and celebrating joys. When we made our vows, we couldn't have imagined all the paths our journey would take, all the ways our family would grow and change. He gestured toward my sister Andrea and her husband Tom, their twins now teenagers with personalities distinctly their own. Then to me and Rachel, with Ethan sleeping peacefully inside. Finally, to my cousin Mark and his wife Stephanie, whose adopted daughters had added another beautiful branch to our family tree. "This," he said emphatically, "this is what we worked for all those years. Not just to pay bills or build careers, but to create moments like this. To watch our children become remarkable adults with families of their own. To know that what we valued most, love, connection, integrity, has been passed down to new generations. He turned to me, his expression warm but pointed. Some of us needed more reminding than others about what truly matters. Good-natured laughter rippled through the gathering. My workaholic past had become a familiar family story, often referenced with affectionate teasing. But, my father continued, some lessons need to be learned firsthand to truly take root. And sometimes those hard-earned lessons become gifts that spread far beyond the person who learned them. He raised his glass higher. To 50 years with the love of my life, the family gathered close, and to the wisdom that helps us distinguish between what is urgent and what is important. As glasses clinked and conversations resumed, my phone buzzed again. This time, I pulled it out to quickly check. The same message from Eliza, now followed by another noting its non-urgent nature and apologizing for the interruption during family time. This small courtesy reflected how deeply the cultural change had permeated Vertex. 10 years ago, an executive would have expected immediate attention regardless of personal circumstances. Now, respect for boundaries was woven into every interaction, an unconscious habit rather than a conscious effort. The following morning, while most of the family was still asleep, I took my coffee to the small dock extending into the lake. The early hour brought a peaceful stillness, with mist rising from the water's surface and birdsong providing nature's gentle soundtrack. I finally opened Eliza's message, which contained unexpected news. After 12 years as CEO of Vertex Global, she had decided to step down. The board was conducting a comprehensive search for her successor, considering both internal and external candidates. Your name has come up repeatedly in board discussions, she wrote. They're particularly impressed with how the Sustainable Excellence Program has positioned Vertex as an employer of choice globally, attracting top talent even in highly competitive markets. I wanted you to know they'll likely approach you formally after your vacation. No need to respond now. Just wanted to give you time to consider whether this might interest you. CEO of Vertex Global. A decade ago, such an opportunity would have seemed not just unattainable, but unimaginable. A quantum leap from my position as a developer trapped in a single system. Even 5 years ago, I might have jumped at it immediately, seeing it as the ultimate validation of our approach to workplace culture. Now, I found myself considering it with unexpected equanimity. It would be a significant shift, demanding more of my time and attention, potentially impacting the balance we had so carefully constructed in our family life. Ethan would be starting school soon, a transition that deserved parental presence and support. The Sustainable Workplace Institute was gaining momentum, with research initiatives and policy advocacy that extended beyond any single corporation. I tucked the phone away again, deciding to share the news with Rachel later. Together, we would evaluate what this potential opportunity might mean for our family and our broader mission. Whatever decision we reached would prioritize sustainable balance rather than traditional notions of career advancement. Footsteps on the dock interrupted my thoughts. Rachel approached, another steaming mug in her hands, wrapped in a light sweater against the morning chill. "You're up early," she observed, settling beside me. "Just enjoying the quiet. Did I wake you?" She shook her head. "Ethan had a bad dream. Once he fell back asleep, I saw the empty bed and figured you'd be out here." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching an osprey circling over the lake in search of its breakfast. After nearly 7 years together, we had developed the kind of partnership where words weren't always necessary, a shared understanding that transcended verbal communication. "I got a message from Eliza," I finally said. "She's stepping down as CEO." Rachel glanced at me, instantly grasping the implication. "And they're considering you as a replacement." Apparently, my name is in the mix. Nothing formal yet. She took a thoughtful sip of her coffee. "How do you feel about it?" It was a simple question, without a simple answer. "Mixed," I admitted. "Honored." "Certainly. A bit intimidated." but mostly I'm evaluating it differently than I would have years ago. Different priorities now, she acknowledged, echoing our conversation from the previous day. Exactly. The role itself would be challenging and meaningful. The platform it would provide to further embed sustainable practices into corporate culture would be unprecedented. But at what cost to our family life? To the Institute's independence? To projects we've been planning? Rachel considered this. We should make a balanced assessment, not reflexively saying yes because it's prestigious, but also not automatically saying no because it might be demanding. Her measured approach was one of the many reasons we worked so well together. Where I might once have leapt at opportunities without considering their broader impact, Rachel naturally considered multiple dimensions of any significant decision. The irony isn't lost on me, I noted with a wry smile. From fighting for basic, work-life boundaries to potentially taking on one of the most demanding corporate roles possible. But that's just it, Rachel countered. It's only a paradox if you assume the CEO role has to consume someone's entire existence. Maybe that's exactly why someone with your perspective should consider it, to demonstrate that even the highest leadership positions can be structured sustainably. It was a compelling point. Throughout our journey, we had repeatedly encountered the argument that certain roles simply couldn't accommodate reasonable boundaries, that executive positions inherently required sacrifice of personal life. We had consistently challenged that assumption, but had yet to test it at the CEO level. Something to think about, I agreed. But not today. Today is for the family. As if on cue, the cabin door opened, and Ethan came bounding down toward the dock, still in his pajamas, my father following at a more measured pace. Daddy, Grandpa says we can go fishing after breakfast. Can we? Please? His enthusiasm was infectious, his eyes bright with anticipation for this simple pleasure. In that moment, the contrast between my current reality and what might have been struck me profoundly. Had I continued down my original path, had I not stood up for that vacation years ago, I might have missed countless moments like this, sacrificed to an unsustainable work culture that demanded everything and returned too little. Absolutely, I assured him, lifting him onto my lap. Fishing sounds perfect. The remainder of the anniversary celebration passed in a blur of family activities, shared meals, and quiet moments of connection. On our final evening, my parents were presented with a special gift, a custom-bound photo album documenting their 50 years together, contributions gathered from everyone in the extended family. As we prepared to depart the next morning, my father pulled me aside while the others were loading the cars. I've been meaning to tell you something, he said, his expression unusually serious. Your mother and I have been following your work these past years. The books, the speeches, the institute. We couldn't be prouder of what you've built. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. But what makes us proudest isn't the professional accomplishments, he continued. It's seeing you create a life that reflects your values. Watching you be present for Rachel and Ethan in ways many men of my generation never managed to be for their families. His words touched me deeply. My father had always been supportive but was typically sparing with direct praise. I learned from your example, I said honestly. You always made time for us, no matter how busy work was. He nodded acknowledgement. I tried, made my share of mistakes along the way, but I recognized early what mattered most. He glanced toward the cabin, where my mother was helping Ethan put on his jacket. Whatever you decide about this CEO opportunity, and yes, your mother told me about it, just remember that no corporate title will ever be as important as the title of husband and father. I know, I assured him. That lesson is permanently engraved now. The 3-hour drive back to Chicago, where we would catch our flight to Boston, gave Rachel and me time to discuss the potential CEO opportunity more thoroughly. Ethan dozed, in his car seat, the excitement of the week having finally caught up with him. If I were to pursue this, I said, we would need clear parameters from the beginning. Sustainability built into the role itself, not just the policies I'd oversee. Rachel nodded. Defined working hours, protected family time. Delegation of appropriate responsibilities rather than the always-on expectation many CEOs operate under. It would mean modeling a different kind of leadership, I mused. Demonstrating that effectiveness isn't measured by availability or the capacity to work around the clock. Which is precisely what we've been advocating all along, Rachel pointed out. Walking the talk at the highest level. By the time we reached the airport, we had outlined a framework for what a sustainable CEO role might look like, the boundaries we would establish, the support structures needed, and the non-negotiable elements of our family life we would protect. Whether the board would be receptive to such an approach remained to be seen. But having clarity about our own priorities would guide whatever discussions might follow. 2 weeks after returning to Boston, I met with Eliza and the board chair, Howard Blackwell, to discuss the potential opportunity. We sat in a conference room overlooking the Boston Harbor, the city skyline providing a dramatic backdrop to our conversation. Your accomplishments speak for themselves, Howard began after preliminary pleasantries. The cultural transformation you've led has positioned Vertex as an industry leader in talent retention and productivity. The board believes you have the vision and leadership qualities to guide the company through its next growth phase. I'm honored by your confidence, I replied sincerely. Before we discuss this further, I want to be transparent about my approach to such a role. I outlined the framework Rachel and I had developed: reasonable working hours with clear boundaries between work and personal time, delegation of appropriate responsibilities to a strong executive team, and protection of family commitments and priorities. Howard and Eliza exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Some might question whether a CEO can be effective with such limitations, Howard noted carefully. The real question, I countered, is whether perpetuating the myth of the always available, all-sacrificing executive actually serves the company's best interests. We have a decade of data showing that well-rested, balanced leaders make better decisions than exhausted ones working around the clock. Eliza smiled slightly. You're suggesting the CEO should embody the same principles we've established for the rest of the organization. Exactly. Leadership by example, not exception. Howard leaned back, considering this perspective. It would be unprecedented, at least in our industry. But then, much of what you've accomplished at Vertex was once considered impossible. The discussion continued for nearly 2 hours, exploring both the business strategy I envisioned for Vertex's future and the practical implementation of a more sustainable executive role. By the time we concluded, it was clear that while the board was intrigued by the approach, they had reservations about departing so dramatically from traditional CEO expectations. We have several outstanding candidates to consider, Howard explained as we wrapped up. I appreciate your candor about your requirements. The board will need to determine whether this alternative model aligns with their vision for Vertex's leadership. As I left the meeting, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Whether or not the opportunity materialized, I had remained true to the principles that had guided my professional evolution. I had not compromised on what mattered most, even when faced with the pinnacle of conventional success. 3 weeks later, the board reached their decision. I was invited to meet with Howard again, this time in his private office. We've completed our selection process, he informed me without preamble. After extensive deliberation, the board has decided to offer you the position of Chief Executive Officer of Vertex Global. I waited, sensing there was more to come. Your proposed framework for a sustainable CEO role was controversial, he continued. Some board members believed it would undermine the position's effectiveness. Others saw it as the natural evolution of the culture you've helped establish throughout the company. Howard smiled slightly. Ultimately, we decided that if anyone could prove that a balanced approach to executive leadership can succeed, it would be you. The offer letter includes the parameters you outlined, with minor adjustments we can discuss. The decision represented far more than a personal career advancement. It was validation of everything we had been advocating. That sustainable work practices could extend to every level of an organization. that effectiveness was not measured by willingness to sacrifice personal life. That balance was not just a luxury, but a strategic advantage. That evening, I shared the news with Rachel as we walked through the Boston Public Garden after dinner, Ethan running ahead to watch the swan boats. "They accepted all our conditions?" she asked, surprised but pleased. "With some small modifications, yes. Quarterly board retreats will require weekend attendance, and certain global client relationships will occasionally need flexibility with time zones. But the core boundaries remain intact." Rachel squeezed my hand. "So, what are you thinking?" I watched Ethan, now feeding ducks with breadcrumbs provided by a kindly park attendant, his face alight with simple joy. "I'm thinking that this is an opportunity to prove what we've been saying all along, that the highest levels of business success can be achieved without sacrificing what matters most." I turned to meet her gaze. "And I'm thinking I couldn't do it without you as my partner." "So you'll accept?" I nodded, with eyes wide open about the challenges ahead. This won't be easy. Changing such deeply ingrained expectations rarely is. But if we succeed, it opens the door for others to follow. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, I reflected on the remarkable journey from that initial moment of standing up for a simple boundary, the right to attend my parents' anniversary celebration, to now accepting a role where I could potentially transform expectations for executive leadership across an entire industry. Systems can change when people refuse to be consumed by them. Sometimes the most meaningful revolutions begin not with grand gestures, but with small acts of resistance, the courage to say no when an unreasonable demand threatens something truly important. I called Ethan, who came running back, his small hand slipping into mine. Together with Rachel, we continued our evening stroll, 3 lives intertwined in a balance that had been hard-won but was now fiercely protected. Whatever challenges the CEO role might bring, whatever obstacles we might face in changing entrenched expectations, this moment, this simple family walk on a summer evening, represented what would always remain my most important priority and greatest accomplishment. Some systems are worth breaking so that better ones can take their place. And sometimes the person who most needs to learn the value of balance is the one who has lived too long without it. That's the end of my story. From overworked developer to CEO, from a denied vacation request to transforming corporate culture, it's been quite a journey. But the most important lesson wasn't about career advancement or professional recognition. It was about recognizing what truly matters and having the courage to protect it. If you're currently caught in a system that demands everything while giving too little in return, remember that change begins with a single boundary, one moment of standing firm, one priority protected, one no that leads to a more meaningful yes. Your specific path will be different from mine. Your challenges and opportunities are unique to your circumstances, but the principle remains the same. No job is worth sacrificing the relationships and experiences that give life its deepest meaning. Systems can change, cultures can evolve, and sometimes, the person best positioned to create that change is the one who recognizes that there must be a better way and refuses to settle for less. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it inspires you to evaluate your own balance, establish your own boundaries, and create your own path to a life where work supports rather than consumes what matters most. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.